Stella Clarke has always been fascinated by e-readers and the technology of e-ink. The fact that something could change its state and remain there without energy was fascinating. There was a moment when she held a piece of e-paper in her hand and suddenly it changed its colour. It was almost like magic. And the ideas started coming. What if you could bring all static surfaces of a car to life? What if cars could even change their colours? It would be the ultimate customisation. Would that even be possible? As a development engineer at the BMW Group, she knew that a good idea could convince people better if it was more than just a simple presentation. So she set to work and built her prototypes. Eventually, 3 years later, at the 2022 Consumer Electronics Show, she and her team presented the result of their hard work, the BMW iX Flow, unveiled at the 2022 CES in Las Vegas. The very first colour-changing car caught the world's attention and opened a new chapter in the personalisation of mobility. Game Changer, an audio series about innovative changemakers. Today's game changer is Stella Clarke. She studied mechanical engineering in her home country, Australia, in the US and in Munich. Since 2007, she has been working as a development engineer at the BMW Group. She developed the idea of using the e-ink technology, known from e-readers, to change the colour of the vehicle exterior, not only for functional use cases, but also to maximise personalisation for the customer. The result was the BMW iX Flow, which was first unveiled at the CES 2022 in Las Vegas. In November of the same year, Time published its annual list of the best inventions, featuring 200 extraordinary, groundbreaking inventions that are changing the way we live, work, play, and think about what's possible. One of these inventions was the iX Flow, the colour-changing car. Hello and welcome, Dr. Stella Clarke.
Hi, Charlie. Thanks. Great to be here.
Welcome on the show. How does it feel to be inventing such, well, I mean, this is like, from my point of view, it's like something out of a sci-fi film, really.
Yeah, it feels awesome that this little idea has now surprised the world and gotten a lot of positive resonance. It's awesome. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm going to dive right in and ask you, what's your definition of a game changer?
To me, a game changer is somebody who can see things that maybe not everybody else can see, often a combination of things that haven't been put together before. So they have a certain kind of open-mindedness to new ideas. But not only that, they also are actionable about these ideas. So they're the kind of people who not only have or see something new, but also fight to implement their ideas.
And being a game changer yourself, I mean, it must be a lot of hard work and vision and a combination of all these factors coming together to really have an idea that most people would just, would think is not even possible, but, to keep believing in it and pushing forwards.
No, I completely agree with you. And truth be told, I have my own story to this story of the color-changing car. And lately I get to talk about innovation, and I get to look up and talk about what is creativity. And I'm reading about it now, and there is a certain science behind creativity and creative people. And I'm reading about it, what it takes to come up with something new, and then I reflect on my own story, and it fits surprisingly well together. And there are a bunch of factors that come together that lead to a new idea, and a lot of common factors are in there. And definitely the idea of never giving up, being conscientious. Not giving up to any kind of negative feedback. I think a lot of people who have new ideas are met with a lot of skepticism about the new ideas. So, you have to be somebody who's somewhat disagreeable, because otherwise you let people talk you out of your idea. On the other hand, you've also got to be hardworking. And on the other hand, there's a bunch of things that come together. And I'm fascinated by the science of creativity itself. And you're absolutely right. It's just a bunch of things that come together there.
Would you say creativity is something that's always run deep in you, from a young age, or is that something that's developed over time?
Yeah, it's interesting. So in general, what I'm reading is, a creative person is often a mixture of certain personality traits. So there's 5 personality traits, and with these traits, you can describe apparently every kind of personality in the world. And these traits are openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, IQ, and neuroticism. And somebody who's kind of creative has to be a certain mixture of all these, and quite an extreme mixture of each of these. And I can certainly confirm that for this particular story, and it seems to be kind of a common denominator for creative people. So I think there is a little bit of personality trait in there. But I definitely also think, people can change, people can be malleable, and I think there's definitely hope for anybody who strives to be creative.
I think that's true. I mean, we all have that kind of neuroplasticity to enable us to change and, evolve and reinvent ourselves. And I guess, as you say, it's that sweet spot of all those attributes coming together. And one thing I found really interesting is, an interview where you said about the difference between holding a prototype in your hand and having a tangible thing versus just an idea or simply hearing about something. What do you think is the difference between, seeing an idea and actually, just hearing about it?
Oh, a big, big difference. So I'm a huge fan of prototyping. So not only seeing an idea, but feeling it and holding it in your hands. I think there's a world of difference, really having an object that you make, and maybe it's, a bad simulation of the final idea or of the final product, but it's still something that's in your hand that people can see live as it's working. So in the case of the color-changing car, there's a big difference between me photoshopping an image of a car or using video editing or actually, having a piece of e-ink in my hand and showing it live. One is actually happening before your eyes. And I think it's easy when you show people something like this, it's easier for them to extrapolate and to imagine the final product by themselves. So a huge fan of prototyping.
How did you even get to that point? Because, I mean, the idea of how you change colour in this way, I guess everybody has a, like an iPad or something nowadays. We're familiar with touchscreens and everything, but this idea of e-ink and e-paper, how do you go from having this idea to actually getting a working prototype? What's involved?
Well, first, there's a genesis, and the genesis is the idea. And I think in this case, probably because I'm an engineer, it was a very tech-oriented genesis. So I am fascinated by tech. And this particular tech of e-ink is quite fascinating. So I like to say, imagine holding a piece of paper in your hand, like a white piece of A4 paper, and it automatically turns black. Like it changes color. So that's the technology we're talking about. And the most amazing thing about it is if you take the energy source away from this, it keeps its color. And that's what we call bistable or bistability. And there's no light that can do that. Kind of any light source, whether it be OLED or LCD or LED, as soon as you take the energy away, the light's out. And this one, it stays. It's bistable and very, very sustainable. And I think it's the closest to magic for an engineer. So that was certainly the genesis. And the very beginning involved pitching the idea without any prototypes. So you had to video edit, pitch, show pictures, PowerPoint, and kind of storytell, and use a lot the word imagine and get people to kind of understand and really imagine your idea in their head. And then when you pitch, you get a bit of money. So I got a little bit of money, I guess now about 7 years ago, to purchase some e-ink and make some very first experiments. And that's where the pitching got hands-on, that I would not just tell a story, but at the end of all this, I would put this piece of, little demo in their hand. They could see the color changing in front of their eyes. And, to say that everyone was on board straight away is not true. There was an awful lot of skepticism. I would say at least 90% thought it was a silly idea. No, that wouldn't happen. No, you wouldn't see it at night. And no, I can't imagine that. It will never be robust enough. So it was an awful lot of backlash that you get. But you don't give up. You keep trying. You maybe change your pitch angle a little bit. You take the feedback and you use it as, positive feedback, and you improve your demos, and then you go back in again and you pitch again. And at some point you get through. In my case, maybe it was 3 years before it really took speed.
Actually, that was going to be my next question. At what point did you feel like you were really starting to turn a corner? And I mean, that's a huge amount of dedication to keep pushing for 3 years to get to that point where you're really gathering that speed and things are snowballing.
Yeah, well, the first time I showed e-ink within BMW, like in a broad environment, was at an internal exhibition in March of 2020. And this exhibition went really, really well. So it was an entire week exhibition. The Monday and Tuesday, I pitched to different people who would come to my stand, all internal workers, but internal decision makers as well. And I showed them the demo. I told my story. I said a lot the word imagine. And at the very end of it, I unveiled a demo that was an interior cockpit demo where you could kind of see or envision how the interior could be if the entire cockpit changed its design. And that came across really, really well. But that still wasn't the moment where a whole load of people were on board. So what happened in that week is that COVID hit and the exhibition got cancelled. And I actually flew straight to Australia before Australia closed its borders, and I had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And then I thought to myself, well, yeah, this is not great. The exhibition was cancelled. What can I do to try and convey this message or spread this message to those who couldn't go to the exhibition? And so I decided to do a 3-minute video pitch where I talked into the camera, kind of like, a YouTube star. It was really embarrassing. It was about a 3-minute long pitch. And I used video editing, I showed various use cases, I explained why e-ink is so awesome. And there was one scene in there where I had taken the BMW Vision M Next. It's a concept car with really, really bright orange highlights, which meant it was very easy to video edit and change colors. And so there was one scene within this pitch where the Vision M Next was changing colors. And so these orange highlights would change to blue. Then I had a sign under there saying, yeah, this is the sustainable mode. And then it would change to red, and this would be the sports mode. And then it would change to green, it'd be like my mode. And I think this is the scene that caught people's attention. And there were 2 people who saw this video, and they didn't just think it was a cool video. They were actionable. So they said, I want to see that. And so we did it. We pretty much took huge basic shapes of a car and implemented them in e-ink and put them on the side of an iX. So 2 huge rectangles for the doors, 2 huge circles for the wheels. And I just sat on the ground playing controller. And it wasn't planned, but one of my colleagues was there and she was taking a video of this. And so for the first time, I wasn't just holding a little hand demo, but really showing big shapes on a car, changing color. And this prototype really helped people to extrapolate in their minds how it could look if a large surface, like a large car, could change colors. And this video went around, and it essentially led to the decision to make the iX Flow.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I mean, you must have been so proud seeing that, actually standing back and seeing it happen in front of your eyes.
Yeah, for sure. I do remember that moment when I was myself sitting on the floor and just connecting wires with my hands. This is how low energy it is. I was literally holding the bare wires in my hand, so it's very, very low energy. And I remember in my peripheral vision, I just saw the car going black. And I remember that was one of my little wow moments here.
Wow, that's very cool. That's very cool. One thing I wanted to ask you is, are there idols, role models, people you've looked to throughout your life, people who've, really, really inspired you and perhaps given you these sparks, these catalyst moments?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Especially now when I'm reading up on, other amazing stories of people fighting for their ideas. Although growing up, I didn't come from an educated family. My dad didn't even finish school, and my mom also. They didn't go to university, so we didn't even know what an engineer was. I do think if somebody in our family or any of our friends was an engineer, they would have been my hero for sure. But my hero, I guess, growing up and also now is my dad. It's a bit of a cliche answer, but I'll go into details maybe a little bit. So he's from New Zealand, and he grew up on a farm in New Zealand. He was one of 13 children, and they were very poor. So, almost all of them didn't finish high school. A lot of them had families very young. They all kind of smoked. It's all a little bit cliche, but, and in the countryside in New Zealand, this is kind of how things were. And my dad was kind of a little bit against the grain. He was the one who didn't smoke. He was the one who had the dream to leave New Zealand. And he was the one who really fought to work hard and to give his family what he could, despite not having an education. And for me, he's a great example of somebody who's kind of broken out of their upbringing and fought for that and, fought to work hard, multiple jobs, so that I could go to a good school. And I really envy that, and I really respect that, because I think nowadays when we judge people, we're quick to judge them absolutely based on what title they have or what their salary is. And I think it's hard to judge a person without knowing where they came from.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. I mean, your father sounds like the perfect role model to, look what he's empowered you to go and do in your life. I mean, that's fantastic. Yeah. And if I may talk a little bit longer about the story. So he was a prison officer in Australia, and so he worked through the ranks of being a prison officer, and he himself has New Zealand Maori roots. And a lot of the offenders in Australian jails are Aboriginals and Maoris. It's just a statistical fact. And he started a program, I think it was called the Pacific Islanders Program, where he would bring in elders and cultural aspects of these cultures, of Aboriginal elders, Maori elders, also from Asia, making or letting offenders know where they come from and showing where they belong and giving them a sense of meaning and belonging in life. And for me, this is also a wonderful example of innovation. It's not tech, but it's bringing together two things that weren't together before. The classic image of, a jail and prisoners, which is classically associated with punishment and segregation, but really bringing in hope and association to the jail with proof of, reducing the reoffending rate of the prisoners, so a measurable success as well. Yeah, that's so inspiring. And I mean, you can well imagine that he probably helped change a lot of people's lives in terms of giving them skills and, and things that they would then be able to take forwards once they went back out into the society.
Yeah, no, for sure.
With that in mind, I mean, were there any game-changing moments in your life? People who, well, whether it was people, but moments, specific things that happened that opened your eyes, whether that was you becoming an engineer or quite what?
Yeah, I think there were multiple game-changing moments for me. I mean, the earliest memories of me, as much as I praise my dad, he was also quite old-fashioned, so that I was interested in tech, didn't really go together with him. And I was often interested in helping him outside, and that for him was, no, you're a girl inside, and, your brother can do that. So I always felt like I had to kind of live up to not being good enough for him. And so one moment I did remember when we went to New Zealand, and we went there often, every year, and I have so many cousins. I have about 60 first cousins, so we'd all, be in a little house, and we'd all sleep on the floor, and we'd all end up watching TV. And VCRs were a thing back then, and whenever something happened with the TV or the VCR, something wasn't working, I'd end up being the person who could repair it. And it wasn't anything highly difficult. It was just pretty much cables being stuck in the right places. But slowly I got a reputation for somebody who could repair these kind of things. And I do remember my dad at some point saying, "Oh, Stella can fix that." And then I do remember it was very young. I must have been about 8 or something, thinking, yeah, cool. I've won his respect. So this was a little moment in my childhood life where I gained a little bit of self-confidence in the area of tech. And later on, I guess it was in about year 9, when I was about 15 years old, there was a subject at school, and it was called Design and Technology. And I went to an all-girls school. That's it's often the case in Australia that it's all girls or all boys. But it was a pretty forward-thinking girls' school. It was the first girls' school in Australia to wear shorts. And it was, I think, the first girls' school in Australia to have this course, Design and Technology, which had woodworking, it had robotic arm programming, it had video editing, the first kind of internet that was out there. We also had a computer with that on it, and I just went off. It was the kind of thing where, I could stay for hours after school and just play with this stuff. And it was the first time I realized, wow, this is my thing. And I think that helped contribute to the decision to become an engineer or even find out what an engineer is.
And I guess so much of engineering is essentially problem solving, isn't it? It's seeing things, thinking of solutions, and even at that young age, at 8 years old, fixing the VCR player, that was perhaps the moments where you started to see the person you had become. And
and I think a lot of us engineers do that when we're little. We like to take stuff apart. We like to see how things work. We just like to fiddle around.
It's a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Stella, I'm going to ask you a series of quick fire questions. This is something that we're doing with all of our guests on the show. And we're calling this series How Dare You? So if you're ready, I've got a few lined up for you here.
Okay.
What was the last new thing that you tried?
I've been into languages lately. So I've been learning Chinese the last few years, to the point where I got to present in Chinese when I was in Shanghai last year. So that was one of my big challenges.
That's incredible. How did you find that? Has it been easy?
I absolutely love it. I mean, I love traveling, kind of this open-mindedness that I think a lot of engineers have. I definitely have as well. And for me, learning a language is like going on a bit of a holiday. And last year, we worked together with a South African artist, Esa Malangu, and she was essentially the inspiration for our last concept car, the i5 Flow Nostacana. And she still speaks in her traditional language. It's called Izi Nabel. And I tried learning that as well. So I took a few lessons in it with the goal of, being at least able to say a few words to her. But I chickened out when I met her. But I did try to learn it. I'll give myself points for that.
Well, kudos to you. I think often that's the thing with languages, isn't it? It's just trying in the first place and making an effort. And
Yeah. And it always sounds silly when you speak a different language. It has such different sounds to your own language.
You must speak a few languages, I guess.
Just English and German for work, and I guess Chinese now.
Wow, that's still probably more than most. What is a new thing that you want to try, but you don't dare?
I would love to be able to sing. I would love to be able to sing, but I just, it's something I don't trust myself to do.
What's stopping you from doing it, really?
I don't know. I mean, everybody can sing, right? And nobody really cares if it comes out bad. I think I just care too much about how other people think. I think I'm not as daring as I like to think I am.
If it means anything, I'm terrible at singing, so I absolutely identify with that fear. I think I would clear the building if I started singing.
But I love the idea of it. It sounds so free to be able to sing, so I'm a bit sad that I don't trust myself to do it, and it's on my bucket list.
I think it's often a confidence thing, isn't it? Like you say, it's just having the belief in yourself to pick up the tools in the first place.
Yeah, you're right.
Now, you've been working on e-ink and how that can be adopted into the car industry. What game-changing moments would you say we are still looking to see? What things are out there that you'd like to see?
You mean aside from e-ink, kind of other ideas out there?
Yeah. Are there any other things that that you think? Well, you've invented e-ink, you've put that on a car. What do you think? What's next? Where do you see things going?
So clearly everything's going in the direction of autonomous, and I would love to see this being pushed even further. So I think there's always going to be a market for racing and people who love to drive, and that will always be there, and I know you're one of them. But there's also the market for, the commute to work or, being dead tired and having to drive to holidays. And I can't wait until this gets highly autonomous, really kind of everything autonomous. Everyone in the traffic system is autonomous. An intersection is not an intersection as we know it, but just a beautiful choreography, a beautiful algorithm of nonstop, seemingly chaotic but very planned movement, and you're at your destination in a very, very fast time, a fraction of what you would have nowadays.
Do you think this is something that we'll see in the next 10 to 20 years? I mean, what's stopping this from happening? What are the barriers, the obstacles that engineers need to fix?
Yeah, I guess it's just not an easy challenge as it is. So we're slowly going through the levels of autonomous driving, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I guess there's just a big milestone to go beyond that. I do think it's a long way. I do think 10 years would be optimistic, maybe 20.
And in terms of e-ink, where do you see that going? What do you think? Obviously, it's something that has so much potential. There's so many things we could probably imagine that we could do with it. What do you, as well as cars, what do you think? Where would it be?
Yeah, I think the direction that we kind of kicked off is going to keep going. It's going to be linearly extrapolated into the future and into other markets. So basically, we showed how it could look like if an object that's not a rectangle e-reader kind of object could look like with color change on it. So, I think we will start seeing buildings with this on it. Buildings where you could change the whole entire building white in summer to reflect sunlight and help keep the interior cool. I think we'll see this in fashion. Color is the ultimate self-expression. I mean, if you describe an object to somebody, good chances are that it's the color you're going to describe, and it has a meaning in every single culture. So, and I think now to have a tool that can change this in any kind of object where you can express yourself, car definitely, fashion, buildings, architecture, arts, I definitely see it on more large objects.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting future of the next few years, I'm sure, as we see this getting out there. What are the changes would you like to see happening in your field? Things that could create, whether it's speeding up the pace of change, whether it's more women in engineering and design and roles. What kind of things would you like to see happening?
Yeah, more women is also awesome, and I'm sure there's many women out there who really would love a career in engineering. Obviously, you'd have to want it. That's the most important thing, that you're happy in what you do, but that would be wonderful. I'm a huge fan of prototyping, so we touched on this before, but I would love it if more engineers built stuff. Nowadays, if you look in most engineering offices, there's just an awful lot of sitting at a computer, making presentations, putting your ideas into images, and I find it just such a win for all if one gave engineers back their passion for making things. I think, if you're in a makerspace, and nowadays the makerspaces are so user-friendly, the machines that you can work with are really user-friendly. Like a laser cutter is something you can learn to use in 2 hours. You can make so much on it. You can laser cut wood, you can laser cut plastic, and really within, minutes, maximum hours, you can put together very simple demos. I remember 10 years ago now, I came up with a simple concept for a new idea for a window switch module. And maybe in about 2-3 hours at a laser cutter, I lasered this, put it together, and the next day in a meeting, I said, this is the idea. And it was so much easier for people to understand and grasp than if I would just show them a picture. They could not only see it and see it to scale, but they could also feel kind of the movement of the buttons. And there were 3D printers and other kind of computer-controlled machines. It's quite easy nowadays to come up with prototypes that are quite simple. They obviously don't look awesome, they don't look professional, but they're a wonderful, quick first step. And then you learn from them, and then you optimize them, and then you iterate again. And the next prototype's a little bit better. And then you optimize, you iterate, and it gets better and better. And I find this method of working is not only fun for engineers, but I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of coming up with an optimal product. Because nowadays, often, we sit there for a long time and come up with a very, very perfect looking product. And that can go very well for sure. But I think there's a lot of merit in the idea of highly iterating and being able to react quickly and change it based on feedback in small feedback rounds, instead of maybe working an entire year on something and showing it at the end of the year and hoping it's good.
Yeah, having that flexibility, that agility to your concepts and the directions you're going in, that must make a big impact.
Yeah, and the main thing, it's fun. I think if you'd ask any engineer, where would you rather work? On your computer with PowerPoint and the Microsoft Office suite, or in a makerspace, kind of building stuff and printing stuff? I think most would choose the latter.
Yeah, there's no substitute for building things with your hands.
Right.
It's a
yeah,
great
people
feeling.
like to make things. They like to build things. Yeah.
What do you think would be the next game-changing thing we might see in your field? You must have some ideas.
That's a big ask. It's a hard one. So I do think I belong to the category of people who tends to be on the creative side. That's a big ask. I think there's been some wonderful concept cars out there. For example, the BMW Gina concept could really kind of morph its surfaces. But, everything that involves moving parts is really difficult to prototype. I know kind of every other idea I had before this involved moving parts, like parts that moved, parts that morphed, and they all failed. But nowadays, there's some really wonderful actuators out there. There's so-called, polymers that are smart. You just kind of apply a voltage to them and they form. If you think about a classic motor, it also creates movement, but it's loud. But these polymers, you apply energy to them and they morph, and it's pretty magical. And there's other actuators out there. I know piezo legs is one of them where, with kind of small components, you can create kind of big displacements of surfaces. So it's a very specific answer, but I would love to see kind of moving parts or morphing of things becoming more out there and more towards series and not just kind of elaborate concepts.
Yeah, the things that actually really make it into fruition.
Yes.
I guess there are so many rules and borders in our world, really. Some make this planet and our society function. Others are just the one next boundary to break. How do you define a limit that holds us back?
Yeah, well, limits are important, of course. The limits help maintain that things are fair and evenly distributed and that there's a certain kind of stability in society. So to just say, no limits, that hasn't been thought through enough. I would say limits shouldn't hinder creativity and innovation. If they limit that, then they've gone too far. But moreover, they should encourage efficiency and being able to concentrate on getting things done. In this day and age, there's, often processes and bureaucracy, and that's understandable to a certain degree, but it can't come at the cost of kind of moving forward with ideas. I think we need to make sure we're working more on actually implementing ideas and getting things done rather than talking about or discussing how we're going to get it done.
Otherwise, we just go around in circles forever, I guess.
Yeah. You can spend a lot of time going around in circles. I think probably everybody knows what those meetings are when many people are sitting in there. And it's very questionable kind of really what the role of every single person in a meeting is. So I'm a big fan of, kind of small group getting things done.
Would you say that's a good way to break through barriers? I mean, that's going to be my sort of final question, really, wrapping up. I mean, what's your best advice? If you're feeling there's a barrier there and you want to get through it, what's the strategy?
Yeah, so if you do find yourself in such a meeting with 20 people and you really think, boy, this is not constructive, then say it. Most people in the meeting have the same impression as you. And actually, one of the personality traits of people who fight through for innovation and creativity is disagreeableness. So you have to sometimes be a little bit disagreeable. So I guess that would be a bit of a tip. Be a bit disagreeable.
Well, that's probably a good way for our listeners to tap into some elements in them to be, a bit disagreeable at times. It's hard sometimes to find that, isn't it? But you've got to push those boundaries. You've got to keep pioneering new ideas and.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, you can't just be disagreeable. It's always a fine dance that you obviously have to positively contribute to whatever it is you do. So it's a little bit of a back and forth.
Well, I think you're certainly contributing a lot of positive things. You've already done that right now, and I'm sure you're going to be pushing the boundaries even further in the next few years.
Thanks, Charlie.
Stella, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much. And looking forward to following everything that happens with changing cars in the future.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It's been a pleasure, and we're working very hard in the background, so stay tuned.
Thank you. Well, folks, I hope you found that conversation as fascinating as I did. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to Dr. Stella Clarke. Join me again for the next episode where I will be talking to yet another game changer. See you soon. Stay tuned.